Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this comforting expectation of precision. Like, it feels almost like engineering.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, you break your arm falling off a bike, the x-ray shows that jagged white line on the screen, and the doctor just points a pen at it and says, there it is, that's the problem.
Right, it's very binary. Broken or not broken.
Exactly. It's a clean system. But then, you step into the world of neurodevelopment or chronic pain or somatic trauma, and suddenly that x-ray machine is just entirely useless. We find ourselves looking at a diagnostic landscape that is incredibly murky.
It is the absolute definition of muddy waters. I mean, the standard biomedical model we rely on so heavily, it's built for acute pathology, like a torn ligament or a bacterial infection.
Right, the obvious stuff.
Exactly. But when you're dealing with chronic systemic tension patterns, the tissues aren't actually broken in a way that an X-ray or even an MRI can easily categorize.
Because they're doing exactly what they're told to do.
Yes. They're functioning exactly as the nervous system is instructing them to, which means the problem isn't in the local hardware. It's in the overarching software.
And that software-hardware connection is exactly the premise of this deep dive today. So to you, the listener, the learner who is constantly hunting for that next fundamental paradigm shift, we are just thrilled to have you here.
It's a really exciting topic.
It really is, because the core question we're tackling today has the potential to literally change the way you sit, stand, and basically just exist in your own skin. What if that chronic burning knot in your shoulder or that, bad posture you're constantly trying to adjust when you catch your reflection, what if that isn't just a physical, mechanical problem?
What if it's a defensive software program that's become physically trapped in your biology?
Exactly.
It forces a profound shift in perspective, really. You have to completely abandon the old Cartesian idea of the human body as this machine made of isolated levers and pulleys and meat.
Yeah, the parts list mentality.
Right. You have to start viewing the body as a continuous, highly intelligent, fluid-based tensegrity structure that is intimately tied to your emotional state.
And to guide us through this entirely new operating system, we are pulling from a fascinating stack of sources today. We're exploring excerpts from two incredibly dense, really insightful documents.
Yeah, they are fantastic reads.
They're called The Fluid Character, Neurofascial Integration and the Water Body, and Thermal Equilibrium, the Golden Path to Fascial Flow. So our mission for this deep dive is to explore what is basically considered the holy grail of modern manual therapy and somatic education.
Which is no small thing.
Not at all. We're going to break down the exact biological mechanisms of how to use specific types of mindfulness to permanently rewire our nervous system and literally structurally reshape our physical bodies.
I was getting my notes arranged here, looking over the thermography data from the sources.
I have to paint the picture for the listener, by the way, because the visual setup you have going today is just incredible. You're making your notes. And behind you on the digital backdrop, there's this microscopic visualization playing on a loop.
Oh, yeah, the ECM rendering.
It looks like a living, glowing web of translucent fibers, constantly shifting and pulsing, bathed in this kind of fluid. It literally looks like a microscopic galaxy inside the human body.
Well, that glowing, shifting web is the perfect visual representation of the extracellular matrix, which is going to be the absolute star of our discussion today.
It's the physical medium where the mind and the body actually meet, right?
Exactly. It's the bridge.
Okay, let's unpack this, because we have to start by setting up the foundational mystery here. What exactly connects a deeply psychological theory from the mid-20th century with the absolute cutting-edge, microscopic fascial science of today?
It seems like a stretch at first glance.
Right, because on the surface, mid-century psychoanalysis and modern connective tissue research seem like two entirely different, totally incompatible worlds.
What's fascinating here is how accurately the historical clinical observation predicted the modern biological reality. I mean, decades before we had the technology to actually see it happening.
So where do we start?
We have to start with Wilhelm Reich. He was a really prominent psychoanalyst writing in the mid-20th century. And, this was an era totally dominated by talk therapy.
Right, the whole Freudian couch setup.
Exactly. The prevailing thought was that neuroses, trauma, emotional blocks, they were entirely cognitive. You lie on a couch, you talk through your childhood, and eventually, supposedly, the mental knot unties itself.
But Reich noticed something else.
He noticed a glaring physical anomaly in his patients that the establishment was just completely ignoring.
He noticed they weren't just emotionally blocked, they were physically bound up.
Yeah, he observed that patients with severe emotional suppression or trauma had this literal physical rigidity to their bodies.
Yeah.
Their breathing was shallow. It was restricted.
Like they couldn't take a full breath if they tried.
Right. Their chests were either perpetually puffed out in this kind of defiance or totally collapsed in defeat. Their jaws were tight. And Reich proposed a radical concept for the time. He called it character armor.
Character armor. It sounds like, I don't know, a term you'd hear in a fantasy role-playing game, not a serious psychoanalytic text.
It really does. But the sources point out that he didn't mean it as a metaphor. Like, he meant it literally.
That's the wild part.
He meant it as an absolute structural reality. He argued that our social conditioning, the ways we're taught from childhood to, hold our tears back, suppress our anger, defend ourselves against emotional pain, that actually manifests as chronic, localized muscular tension.
So it's not just from sitting at a desk too long.
No, not at all. He argued it was a literal shell that forms around a person. He mapped out what he called segmental armoring, where specific emotional blocks correspond to specific bands of tension in the body.
Like what kind of segment?
Well, like the ocular segment around the eyes, the oral segment around the jaw, the diaphragmatic segment restricting the breath. And the text uses this incredibly evocative phrase for this phenomena. It called this armoring frozen history.
Frozen history. That stops you in your tracks. The idea that your body is a walking museum of every time you had to brace yourself against the world.
It's a heavy thought, isn't it?
It really is. And Reich's clinical observation was that because this history is frozen in the tissue, you couldn't just talk someone out of their neurosis.
Right. You could spend 10 years in talk therapy analyzing why you're anxious.
Yeah.
But if your diaphragm is physically locked in a state of terror, the anxiety isn't going anywhere.
So you have to address the body directly.
He realized that to access the repressed emotion, you had to physically dismantle the stagnation in the body. You had to physically break down the armor.
But I'm guessing the medical community back then wasn't totally on board with this.
Oh, not at all. For a very long time, the mainstream medical establishment didn't know what to do with Reich's ideas. They felt too unscientific, too esoteric.
Yeah.
But this is where the bridge to modern science is finally being built. We can now map his concept of character armor directly onto our modern microscopic understanding of fascial science.
Okay, let's define fascia for the listener, because we really have to get past the basic mainstream understanding of it.
We do.
Most people outside of somatic therapy still think of fascia as just like plantar fasciitis, that annoying band in the bottom of your foot that hurts when you run, or they think of the IT band on the side of the leg. They think it's just these isolated, tough strips of gristle.
Right, because we've been trained by traditional anatomy textbooks to view the body as parts. The bicep is here, the femur is there, the IT band is over here.
Like a car engine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But fascia, properly termed the extracellular matrix, or ECM, it completely defies that categorization. It is a continuous, three-dimensional, fluid-filled structural matrix.
It's everywhere.
It surrounds every single muscle fiber, every bundle of fibers, every organ, every blood vessel, and every nerve in your body.
Yeah.
I mean, if you could magically dissolve every bone, organ, and muscle cell in your body, leaving only the fascial web,
Yeah.
you would still perfectly see your exact physical shape, right down to the features of your face.
It's the ultimate biological bodysuit. And the sources use this concept of biotensegrity to explain how this web functions.
It's a great model.
Yeah, imagine you're wearing a tightly knit, full-body sweater. If you pull a loose thread down at the bottom hem near your left hip, that tension doesn't just stay at the hip.
No, it translates.
It travels diagonally up the fabric, creating a visible pull all the way across your torso to your right shoulder. You can't affect one part of a continuous web without affecting the entire system.
And this continuous nature is exactly how an emotion becomes a physical sweater that's pulled too tight. To understand the transition from an abstract feeling to a literal structural change, we have to look at two specific cellular and physical properties of the fascial web. It's plasticity versus elasticity, and a phenomenon called thixotropy.
Let's dive deep into those, starting with plasticity versus elasticity.
Yeah.
Because I think people use those terms interchangeably, but biologically they mean completely different things.
They do, and the distinction is vital for understanding why our bodies get stuck in these painful patterns. Elasticity is the ability of a material to stretch under a load and then immediately snap back to its original shape once the load is removed.
So think of a brand new healthy rubber band.
Exactly. Fascia absolutely has elastic properties, which allows us to bend, twist, and, absorb impact. But fascia is also highly adaptive. It has plasticity.
And plasticity means?
Plasticity means the material can be deformed, molded into a completely new shape, and it will permanently stay that way even after the original force is gone.
Okay, so when a person is subjected to chronic stress, let's say they're in a toxic work environment or they're dealing with long-term financial anxiety, their nervous system enters a subtle startle response.
Yes, the classic defense posture.
Their shoulders creep up toward their ears, their chest caves in slightly to protect the vital organs, their jaw clenches.
They're perpetually bracing for a physical impact that never actually arrives.
Yeah.
And because they hold that posture day after day, the body's innate intelligence kicks in.
Because the body operates on pure efficiency, right?
Always. It senses this constant, exhausting muscular effort to keep the shoulders up by the ears, and it essentially says, we seem to be holding this defensive posture an awful lot. It's costing way too much metabolic energy. Let's build some permanent scaffolding to hold this position for them.
Wow. It literally starts a construction project based on your anxiety.
It really does. The primary cells inside the fascial web are called fibroblasts. Their main job is to synthesize collagen, which is the strong structural protein of the body.
Okay.
When the fibroblasts sense this chronic mechanical stress, they begin frantically laying down extra collagen fibers along the lines of that tension. They build a thick, dense scaffolding to permanently support that hunched, braced position.
So the emotional state of defense is now a structural reality.
Yes, that is plasticity in action. The history is now physically frozen.
That is deeply unsettling, but also kind of biologically brilliant. I mean, the body is just trying to help you maintain what it thinks is a necessary survival posture.
It thinks it's doing you a favor.
Yeah. And then there's the second concept, thixotropy. This is where the physical state of the tissue actually transforms, right?
Yes, thixotropy is a principle of fluid dynamics. Fascia isn't just dry, stringy fibers. Those collagen fibers are suspended in a gel-like substance called ground substance.
What's that made of?
It's primarily made of water and specialized proteins called glycosaminoglycans. And this ground substance is thixotropic, meaning its viscosity, how thick or thin it is, changes based on kinetic energy and mechanical pressure.
So it shifts forms.
Exactly. It shifts between a fluid state, known as a sol state, and a highly viscous, thick gel state.
It's like ketchup.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
Right. If ketchup just sits undisturbed in a glass bottle, it forms a thick, solid gel. You can turn the bottle upside down and nothing comes out.
Nothing at all.
But if you introduce kinetic energy, like if you smack the side of the bottle or shake it, the mechanical force breaks the weak molecular bonds, and the ketchup instantly transforms into a fluid and pours out.
Or think of non-drip paint. It stays solid on the brush so it doesn't run down your arm. But the moment you apply the sheer force of spreading it against the wall, it liquefies.
Okay, so apply that exact physical property to the ground substance inside your body.
Right. When you have a chronic lack of movement, or when a specific area of your body is locked down in that emotional bracing pattern we talked about, the local ground substance is deprived of kinetic energy.
So it thickens.
It thickens. The water content gets trapped, the proteins bind together, and it turns into a dense, restrictive gel.
So between the fibroblasts laying down extra collagen fibers and the ground substance thickening into a dense gel, you are literally structurally turning into a statue of your own anxiety.
You're building Reich's character armor on a microscopic level.
But here's the fundamental question that jumps out. How does the emotional stressor in the brain actually communicate with the fascia in the shoulder? I mean, we're talking about two different systems, the psychological mind and the connective tissue.
This raises an important question about the deeply intertwined relationship between the nervous system and the fascial web.
Because the traditional view has always been that the nervous system commands the muscles and the fascia is just like inert wrapping paper holding it all together.
Which is completely wrong. The sources clarify that neurofascial integration is a profound two-way street. Fascia is not inert. It is arguably the richest sensory organ in the entire human body.
See, that completely upended my understanding of anatomy. I was always taught that the skin was our primary sensory organ, or maybe the eyes and ears.
Most people are taught that.
But the text states the fascia is packed with sensory nerves.
Packed is almost an understatement. The fascial web is embedded with hundreds of millions of sensory receptors. Millions! Specifically interoceptive receptors and mechanoreceptors. You have Ruffini corpuscles, which respond to sustained downward pressure and lateral stretch. You have Pacinian corpuscles, which are incredibly sensitive to rapid changes in pressure and vibration.
It's like a high-tech surveillance system.
It is. You also have interstitial receptors that sense chemical changes and pH levels. All of these microscopic sensors are constantly reading the internal state of your physical body and firing a massive stream of data up the spinal cord directly to the brain.
Okay, so let's look at what happens when that tissue gets armored. If the thixotropic gel thickens and the extra collagen is binding everything tightly together, what are those millions of Ruffini and Pacinian receptors actually experiencing?
Well, they're being compressed, stretched, and practically suffocated.
Ouch.
Yeah, and in response, they begin firing off a relentless, constant alarm signal. They flood the autonomic nervous system, the ANS, with signals of extreme mechanical tension, which the brain interprets as threat.
Wow. So this creates a terrifying feedback loop. You could be sitting on your sofa in your living room, completely safe, just trying to read a book. There's no tiger hunting you.
Right, no external danger whatsoever.
But because your physical suit is armored and dense, your brain is receiving millions of data points per second, screaming that you are under immense physical stress.
And the brain reacts accordingly. It keeps the entire system locked in a state of sympathetic arousal. It keeps the fight or flight response simmering in the background.
So the brain says, I'm receiving threat signals from the tissue, so I must stay anxious.
Exactly. And then the anxiety tells the body, we are in danger, keep bracing. The physical tension creates the neurological anxiety, which in turn reinforces the physical tension.
It's a perfectly closed, self-sustaining loop of suffering.
It really is. And the sources mention a specific cellular mechanism that makes this even more direct. The nervous system doesn't even need the large skeletal muscles to create this tension.
What does it use?
It uses myofibroblasts.
Myofibroblasts.
Yeah, this was a massive paradigm shift in fascial research. For the longest time, science believed that only skeletal muscles, smooth muscles and organs, and cardiac muscles have the ability to contract.
That's what I learned in biology.
Right. But researchers discovered that fascia contains its own unique contractile cells, myofibroblasts. These are essentially a hybrid between a collagen-producing fibroblast and a smooth muscle cell, and they are wired directly to the autonomic nervous system.
Wait, meaning your subconscious nervous system can bypass your voluntary muscles entirely and just command the fascia to shrink?
Exactly. When the sympathetic nervous system ramps up during periods of emotional stress, it releases neurotransmitters that signal these myofibroblasts to contract.
Just on their own?
Yes. It's a slow, sustained contraction. Much slower than, say, a bicep curl, but it is incredibly powerful. Over weeks and months, the autonomic nervous system's perception of danger becomes a literal structural shortening of the web.
Wait, hold on. I need to interject here because if I'm listening to this, a very obvious practical solution comes to mind.
I think I know where you're going with this.
If character armor is ultimately a physical problem, if it's just shortened fascia, extra collagen, and thickened gel, why can't I just mechanically break it apart?
A mechanical approach.
Yeah, why can't I just go to a 90-minute, extremely intense hot yoga class or book a 2-hour deep tissue sports massage and just physically force the tissue back to its normal length? People do that all the time.
It is the most intuitive approach. I mean, if something is tight, pull it apart. If something is hard, crush it until it's soft.
Right?
And it is the exact reason why millions of people feel incredibly frustrated when they spend hundreds of dollars on a deep tissue massage, feel great for about 12 hours, and then wake up the next morning with the exact same burning knot in their shoulder.
Yeah, the knot always comes back. And the sources bring up a brilliant analogy to explain why this mechanical approach fails: the rubber band and the motor.
That's a great one. Imagine your fascial web is a thick rubber band. You can grab the middle of that rubber band and pull it as hard as you want. You can stretch it out. But if there is an electric motor attached to both ends of that rubber band, and that motor is programmed to constantly reel the band in tight, all your stretching is entirely futile.
Because the absolute second you let go, the motor just pulls it right back to where it was.
Exactly.
So massaging the knot is just stretching the middle of the rubber band, But what is the motor in this scenario?
The motor is your nervous system, operating through a mechanism known as gamma motor neuron activity.
Gamma motor neurons.
Yes. To understand this, we have to look at how the brain controls muscle length. Inside your muscles, there are microscopic sensory organs called muscle spindles. Their job is to measure how fast and how far a muscle is stretching, basically to prevent you from tearing it.
They're the body's internal emergency brakes.
Precisely. And the brain controls the sensitivity of these emergency brakes using gamma motor neurons. Think of it like a volume dial on an amplifier.
Okay, I follow.
If the brain perceives that you're in a safe environment, it turns the gamma volume down. The tissue is allowed to be slack and relaxed. But if the brain perceives a threat based on emotional trauma, chronic stress, or even just a fear of injury, it cranks the gamma volume all the way up.
It increases the gamma bias.
Yes, this makes the muscle spindles hypersensitive, keeping the baseline tone of the muscle and the surrounding fascia dialed up incredibly high.
So the brain essentially sets a new, highly elevated default resting state for that tissue. It views this tight, contracted, armored state as safe, simply because it's become familiar.
And this is exactly why aggressive mechanical therapies fail to produce permanent change. When you go get a deep tissue massage or you force your way into an extreme yoga pose, the physical pressure is an extrinsic force. It's a force being applied from the outside.
And your nervous system is acutely aware of this.
The brain is sitting up there saying, okay, there's an elbow digging into my shoulder right now. I'll temporarily yield to the pressure.
But the underlying gamma bias hasn't changed.
The software program hasn't been updated. So the moment the massage therapist takes their elbow out of your shoulder, or the moment you roll up your yoga mat and get back in your car, the brain immediately fires those gamma motor neurons right back up.
The motor kicks in.
The motor kicks in, and it reels the tissue right back into its default armored setting.
So what does this all mean for the listener who is trying to heal chronic tension? It means we've been approaching the problem backward. Mechanical structural approaches are fundamentally flawed if they don't simultaneously address the neurological software that is commanding the tissue.
That is the holy grail of modern somatic therapy that the text referred to. You cannot permanently change the physical hardware without updating the neurological software that governs it.
Which brings us perfectly to the second major concept in our deep dive today. We've talked about Wilhelm Reich, who illuminated the why of character armor, the emotional trauma becoming physical.
Right.
Now we need to look closer at the sheer exhaustion of living with this armor and bring in another absolute titan in the field of somatic theory, Moshe Feldenkrais.
Moshe Feldenkrais was a really fascinating figure. He was a physicist, an engineer, and a martial artist.
That's quite a resume.
It is. And because of that unique background, he observed the human body in a completely different way than traditional medical doctors or fitness instructors do. He viewed the body through the lens of profound biomechanical efficiency.
Which is very different from just building muscle.
Very. And his insights explain exactly why living with Reich's character armor is so metabolically draining.
The sources outline a critical distinction that Feldenkrais made regarding how we use our muscles. He noted that armoring is essentially the body making a terrible anatomical mistake. It uses our voluntary, fast-twitch muscles for long-term structural jobs they were never evolutionarily designed to do.
We have to categorize our musculature to understand this. On a basic level, we have phasic muscles and postural muscles.
Okay, let's break those down.
Phasic muscles are our outer, superficial, fast-twitch muscles. Your biceps, your pecs, your major quad muscles. They are designed for explosive, quick movement, lifting, running, throwing.
They burn a lot of energy.
They burn energy rapidly, and they fatigue very quickly. Postural muscles, on the other hand, are the deep, slow-twitch muscles right up against the spine and the joints. They are designed for long-term, low-energy endurance.
But when we form character armor, or when we try to forcefully correct our bad posture by, thrusting our chest out and pinning our shoulders back through sheer willpower, we are recruiting those fast-twitch phasic muscles to hold us up against gravity all day long.
We are forcing the wrong system to do the job. The text uses a brilliant visceral analogy for this. I want the listener to really picture this scenario.
Yeah, this one blew my mind.
Imagine you hire an elite Olympic sprint runner. Their entire physiology is built for 10 seconds of explosive maximum effort action.
Right.
But instead of putting them on a track, you tell them their job is to stand in a hallway and hold a heavy, solid oak door open for 12 hours a day.
What happens to that sprint runner? Within an hour, they are shaking. Within 2 hours, their muscles are cramping and hardening. Eventually, they will completely fail and collapse.
It is the completely wrong application of force.
And that is exactly what your phasic muscles are doing when they form character armor. Your traps, your neck muscles, your superficial back muscles, they are cramping, burning, and hardening into gel because they're exhausting themselves trying to do the job that belongs to the skeleton and the deep connective tissue.
So how is the body actually designed to hold itself upright without exhausting the sprint runners? This introduces a revolutionary architectural concept called biotensegrity.
Biotensegrity. Biological tensegrity. It's a concept that completely breaks the classical Newtonian view of anatomy.
It really does.
Because if you look at a skeleton hanging on a metal stand in a doctor's office, the implication is that our bones just stack on top of each other like a column of bricks.
That is the classical biomechanical model. It assumes the body relies purely on continuous compression. In a stack of bricks, the weight of the top brick rests entirely on the brick below it, all the way down to the ground.
Which makes sense for a building, but not a moving body.
Right, because it's highly unstable. If you apply a sheer force if you push the top brick from the side, the whole stack immediately topples over. To keep a stack of bricks upright while it's moving, you would need massive, thick cables constantly pulling against it from all sides.
And that is the exhausting muscular effort model we were just talking about.
Exactly. But biotensegrity argues we aren't built like a stack of bricks. We are built more like a modern suspension bridge or one of those geodesic domes designed by Buckminster Fuller.
So how does a geodesic dome work in the body?
In a tensegrity structure, you have discontinuous compression and continuous tension. Applying that to the body, your bones do not actually rest directly on one another.
Wait, they don't?
If they did, the friction would grind them to dust. The bones act as rigid compression struts that push outward. The fascial web acts as a continuous series of elastic tension cables that pull inward.
So the skeleton?
The skeleton literally floats within this highly pressurized continuous web of tension.
The bones float. Just conceptualizing that completely rewrites how I feel my own body sitting in this chair right now. My spine isn't a stacked pillar. It's a series of floating spacers suspended in a web.
It's amazing to think about. And when a tensegrity structure is properly aligned, an impact on one corner is instantly distributed across the entire web. It is incredibly resilient.
And when your physical alignment is correct, when you find what Feldenkrais called skeletal neutral, the downward force of gravity is transferred seamlessly through the floating bones, down through the legs, and directly into the ground.
Yes, and the phasic muscles do not have to hold you up. They can power down. They can remain entirely soft, resting, and ready for action, rather than being stuck in an endless, agonizing support role.
But finding this skeletal neutral is notoriously difficult because of our cultural conditioning, isn't it?
Oh, completely.
We're taught that good posture requires effort. Stand up straight, shoulders back, stomach in. We treat posture like a military drill.
We really do. But Feldenkrais had a core insight about effort that flips this entirely on its head. He said, if you exert yourself, you cannot feel what you are doing.
That is arguably the single most important axiom in all of somatic education. Excessive muscular effort completely masks interoceptive awareness.
Our nervous system operates on a principle of contrast. If you are using a huge amount of voluntary muscular effort, if you are trying really hard to force your spine straight and rigidly pin your shoulders back, that loud macroscopic signal of muscular effort completely drowns out the subtle microscopic sensory feedback coming from your fascia and your joint capsules.
It's a signal-to-noise problem.
Exactly.
It's like trying to listen to a friend whisper a secret to you while you're standing next to a roaring jet engine. The effort is the jet engine. You literally deafen your internal awareness.
So to find this elusive skeletal neutral, you cannot force your way there. You literally have to give up. You have to entirely relinquish the will to stand straight.
You have to stop trying to hold yourself up.
Instead, you must quiet the jet engine. You shift your conscious awareness away from the burning tight muscles on the surface, and you try to inhabit the center of your mass.
You bring your attention to the bones themselves.
Right. And as you reduce the muscular effort, the whisper becomes audible. You start to detect what Feldenkrais called parasitic tensions.
Parasitic tensions. That is such an accurate descriptor for Reich's character armor. It's a tension pattern that has attached itself to your structure, feeding off your daily metabolic energy without providing any actual structural benefit.
Not at all.
It's just a parasite pulling your skeleton out of its natural, effortless, floating stack.
And here's where the neuroplasticity, the actual rewiring of the brain, comes into play. When you manage to quiet the muscles and you let the skeleton properly transfer the weight of gravity into the floor, your nervous system registers a sudden, massive drop in energy expenditure.
The body suddenly realizes, wait a minute, I don't need to burn thousands of calories an hour just to keep my head from falling off.
The sources refer to this moment as an energetic win. The human brain, shaped by millions of years of evolution, is absolutely obsessed with metabolic efficiency. It wants to conserve energy at all costs.
So when it experiences this profound energetic win, it acts as a highly powerful intrinsic reward for neuroplasticity.
The brain says, this new alignment is incredibly cheap to run. I want to keep this. It begins to update that gamma bias we talked about earlier.
The motor turns down.
Exactly. And when the nervous system powers down the alarm, the fibroblasts stop laying down excess collagen. The ground substance is allowed to thin out. The structural brace is dismantled because it's no longer needed. The history thaws.
Okay, I want to synthesize where we are so far because the progression is incredible.
Yeah.
Reich identified the why. He showed us that emotional defense creates the literal physical armor.
Right.
Feldenkrais identified the how. He showed us that finding biomechanical, skeletal efficiency is the key to escaping the exhaustion of that armor. But as a listener, I'm thinking, we are still missing the actual tool. How do we practically bridge these two ideas? If I have to use my brain to feel these hidden parasitic tensions, how do I even find them?
That is the ultimate practical challenge. Because of the highly efficient way our brain maps our physical body, a vast majority of this character armor is completely, entirely hidden from our conscious waking awareness.
Which means we have to explore the parts of our body that we can't even feel anymore.
Yeah.
The parts the text chillingly refers to as black holes.
To understand how a part of your own body becomes a black hole, we have to revisit the continuous web of tensegrity and look at the polarities of the fascial system.
Okay, let's look at the polarities.
Because tensegrity relies on a continuous distribution of tension, every action in the web dictates a reaction. If you have an area of your body that is too tight, the thick, dense, hypersensitive armor, it must be mathematically balanced by an area somewhere else in the web that is too loose or collapsed.
So picture setting up a large camping tent.
Yeah, that works.
If you go to one corner of the tent and pull that guy line incredibly tight, violently staking it into the ground, what happens to the rest of the tent? The fabric warps, and the rope on the exact opposite side of the tent is going to go completely slack.
That is exactly what happens in the body. The overactive, over-tightened area is the armor. It is loud and inflamed. But the underactive area, the opposite side of the tent, becomes overstretched.
It loses its structural integrity.
Right. It becomes numb. And this is where we encounter a neurological phenomenon known as sensory motor amnesia, or what is more broadly called cortical blindness.
Cortical blindness, meaning your brain's somatosensory cortex, the part of the brain that maps out your physical body, literally stops seeing that specific body part. It goes blind to it.
Again, we look at the brain's obsession with efficiency. Processing sensory data from millions of mechanoreceptors takes a lot of glucose, a lot of energy.
So it's always trying to trim the budget.
Exactly. In the weak, collapsed, slack areas of your fascia, the mechanoreceptors are not being stimulated because there is no tension pulling on them. They go silent.
The brain looks at that silent area and says, well, there's no useful data coming from here, so let's just shut off the lights to save on the electric bill.
It literally preens the synaptic connections. It demaps that tissue. And you are left with a sensory gap, a localized black hole in your internal awareness.
And this pruning creates a massive, frustrating signal-to-noise problem for anyone trying to heal their own chronic pain, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The nervous system is designed to prioritize nociception, which are pain signals and extreme high-tension signals. So the tight armored area is constantly screaming at the brain.
The localized pain in your neck is screaming.
But the weak, collapsed fascia in your lower back or your chest is completely, utterly silent.
The source material calls this the tug-of-war principle. And I love this visual. It states that the localized pain you feel on a daily basis, let's say a sharp burning pain right at the base of your neck, is almost never the actual problem.
Almost never.
It is just the squeaky wheel. It is the victim. It's the place where the fascial fabric is being pulled so relentlessly tight that it is quite literally starting to tear.
The painful area is losing the tug-of-war. The actual cause of the pain is the anchor. And the anchor is almost always a distant, completely silent, dense area of character armor.
Let's give an example.
Let's say someone has severe emotional armoring around their heart, a deeply sunken, locked up, completely rigid chest wall. That chest armor is the anchor. It is pulling the entire fascial web of the torso forward and down.
And the neck muscles.
The muscles in the back of the neck are screaming in pain because they're desperately trying to pull the head back up against the massive weight of that chest anchor.
So if I have that neck pain and I go to a massage therapist and say, please just dig your elbow into my neck, what am I actually accomplishing? I'm imagining a house with a massive leak in the roof and water is pouring into the living room.
I like this.
Massaging the neck is like putting a bucket under the leak, emptying it every hour, and congratulating yourself on fixing the house, completely ignoring the giant hole in the roof.
That is a perfect analogy. You're just temporarily silencing the victim's alarm while the fire is still raging at the anchor. To restore the tensegrity system to balance, you cannot just try to loosen the tight, painful tent rope.
You must find a way to take up the slack in the opposite, silent, weak rope.
Exactly.
But wait, I have to ask the highly practical, completely frustrating question on behalf of the listener here.
Go for it.
If a part of my body is neurologically blind, if it has been pruned from my brain map and is a literal black hole, how on earth do I bring conscious awareness to an absolute absence of sensation? I can't just think about it because there's nothing to feel.
It is arguably the most difficult and frustrating phase of somatic practice. You are asking the brain to shift from its evolutionary default of detecting loud, painful signals to detecting a subtle lack of support.
You are trying to feel a void.
But there are highly specific, trained techniques to coax the brain into seeing the blind spots again. The text outlines 3 distinct methods. The first is called the shadow technique.
The shadow technique. Walk me through exactly how I would do that right now.
It relies on geographical proximity. Usually, right next to a highly dense, tight band of armor, there is a soft collapse section that is mechanically allowing that tightness to exist.
Okay.
If you feel a tight, painful band of armor in the front of your right shoulder, do not focus your attention on the pain. Follow the tight band with your mind until you reach its physical edge.
And then what?
And then, consciously step your awareness into the soft, silent void right next to or behind it. Look for the area, perhaps in the back of the armpit or the upper ribs, where the structural support has just vibrated away into nothingness.
So you use the loud signal as a guide rope to walk you to the edge of the cliff, and then you peer into the shadow right behind it.
Exactly. The second technique requires a bit more imagination. It is the density check.
Density check.
As you mentally scan your body during a quiet moment, you ask your nervous system a spatial question. Does this specific area of my body feel like a fully inflated 3-dimensional volume, or does it feel like a flat 2-dimensional shadow?
And the blind spots feel flat.
Weak, cortically blind fascia often feels incredibly hollow. It feels paper thin, as if it lacks actual depth or mass.
It feels like you're wearing an empty shirt sleeve instead of actually possessing an arm.
Yes.
Yes.
You're feeling for the lack of volume. And the third technique is gravity biofeedback.
How does that one work?
Instead of constantly scanning your body for where you are actively tense, you change the parameters. You feel for where your body is actively leaking weight.
Leaking weight.
If you are sitting in a chair right now, pay attention to your lower back. Does your lumbar spine and pelvis feel like a buoyant, highly pressurized supportive web that is easily transferring your weight into the chair? Or does it feel like a heavy, dead weight just passively hanging off your spine, leaking its mass downwards toward the floor?
So you're looking for the structural leaks. You're looking for the flat 2D shadows. That is a profound shift in how we're taught to inhabit our bodies.
It changes everything.
But bringing sustained awareness to a numb void requires immense, unbroken cognitive focus. We can't just think at a black hole and expect it to wake up. We need a physical bridge to carry our nervous system into these dead zones.
We do.
And the text points us to the ultimate biological vehicle, the breath. But crucially, not the way we normally think about deep breathing.
That is the pivotal transition. If these black holes are numb, we need a physical expansion to wake up the mechanoreceptors.
Why is the breath the chosen vehicle? The source material highlights something entirely unique about the respiratory system from a neurological standpoint. It bridges the gap.
Breathing is the single vital function in the entire human body that is explicitly governed by both the somatic nervous system, which is our voluntary conscious control, and the autonomic nervous system, which is our subconscious involuntary programming.
Meaning, I can fall asleep, completely lose consciousness, and my brainstem will automatically regulate my breath to keep me alive.
Right.
But I can also, at any given waking moment, consciously choose to hold my breath or force a massive exhale.
Because it straddles both the conscious and subconscious systems, it is the literal biological gateway between your conscious analytical mind and your subconscious somatic programming.
Like a direct line to headquarters.
Exactly. Through the vagus nerve, the rhythm and depth of your breath directly communicate the state of your environment to your brain. However, trying to use breath alone to break through character armor has severe, often counterproductive limitations.
The text calls this limitation the bellows effect.
Yeah.
And here is where it gets really interesting and incredibly counterintuitive.
Let's talk about the bellows.
Think about old-fashioned fireplace bellows, the kind made of folded leather and wood handles. If that leather is supple, soft, and healthy, you pull the handles apart, the leather expands effortlessly, and it pulls in a massive volume of air to stoke the fire. But what if that leather is stiff, dried out, armored fascia?
If the lever of your bodysuit is armored and rigid, you can attempt to force a massive amount of air into your lungs, but it will not expand the tissue. The armor won't yield.
So where does the air go?
Instead, forcing that aggressive deep breath simply displaces your internal organs. It forcefully shoves your viscera out of the way, pushing your belly out without actually expanding the ribcage. And much worse than that, it can actively trigger a massive defense response from the nervous system.
Because your nervous system built that rigid armor shell specifically to feel safe. It is a protective wall.
Exactly.
And if you sit down and aggressively try to stretch that wall from the inside with a massive forced inhalation, the nervous system perceives that internal pressure as an intrusion. It perceives the breath itself as an attack.
And what does it do? It actively tightens the armor even further to defend against you.
This perfectly explains a phenomenon so many people experience. They go to a yoga class or they download a meditation app to help with their anxiety.
And they're told to breathe deep.
The instructor tells them to take a huge, deep belly breath, and the moment they try, they feel this intense, terrifying restriction, panic, and anxiety build up in their chest.
They're literally fighting a war against their own biological armor, and the armor always wins.
So if we can't force the bellows open, what is the solution? How do we use the breath without triggering the alarm?
The solution lies in combining a much softer approach called the volumetric, or 3D breath, with highly specific mindful visualizations, a well-documented concept known as ideokinesis.
Ideokinesis, the foundational idea that deeply imagining a specific movement or physical state can actually biologically alter your neuromuscular alignment and tissue state.
And this raises an important question in neuroscience. How does the motor cortex in the brain tell the difference between physical reality and a highly vivid, focused imagination?
We see this with Olympic athletes all the time, right? Functional MRI scans show that when a skier vividly visualizes their downhill run, the exact same motor pathways light up in the brain as if they were actually on the mountain.
It's incredible. In somatic practice, the brain often doesn't differentiate. It reacts to the visualization as a physical command.
So to bypass the armor's defense, you stop aggressively pushing air.
Instead, you employ the 3D volumetric breath. You don't try to heave your chest up. You simply imagine the incoming breath as a gentle change in internal fluid pressure that expands equally in all 360 degrees, front, back, sides, up, and down.
Like a balloon gently inflating.
Exactly. And when that soft, spherical pressure hits the rigid wall of your internal armor, you do not try to push through it. You stop. You just gently rest your conscious awareness right against the boundary of the tightness.
And from that place of gentle contact, you apply the specific ideokinetic visualizations from the text to trick the nervous system into finally letting go.
That's the secret.
I want to go through these specific visualizations because they are incredibly evocative, deeply creative, and highly practical for the listener to try right now. The first one listed is the string of pearls.
This imagery is specifically designed to shift the brain's internal map of the spinal column. Most of us unconsciously view our spine as a solid, rigid pole, a structural wall holding us upright.
Right.
The visualization asks you to close your eyes and imagine your spine is no longer bone, but a delicate string of heavy, lustrous pearls. A single, invisible thread pulls gently upward from the very crown of your head, and each pearl, each individual vertebra, hangs completely freely, suspended by gravity, with space between every single one.
Just visualizing that right now, I can literally feel the tiny erector muscles running down the sides of my backstop gripping. It instantly changes the internal map of the spine from a rigid, braced pole to a fluid, mobile chain.
That is the ideokinetic effect. The brain visualizes the chain, and it tells the large, armored, fast-twitch muscles, you can go off duty now. We're just hanging. It lets the tiny, deep, slow-twitch stabilizing muscles handle the balance.
The next visualization is vital for modern tech workers. It's the buoyant cork.
Oh, this one is so helpful. This one addresses the neck and the head. The text notes a terrifying statistic. The human head weighs roughly 10 to 12 pounds. It is essentially a bowling ball resting on a very thin stick.
And because we spend our days leaning forward staring at screens, we use an immense amount of chronic neck tension to keep that bowling ball from falling off.
The suboccipital muscles at the very base of the skull become prime real estate for dense character armor. So instead of trying to manually massage or hold your head up, you use the cork visualization.
How does that go?
You imagine that your entire torso is a deep, quiet pool of water, and your heavy head is suddenly transformed into a light, highly buoyant cork, just gently bobbing on the surface of that water.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
If you tilt your head forward or backward, it doesn't fall heavily, it just floats, supported by the hydrostatic pressure, to a new, effortless position.
The moment you picture the water holding the weight, the suboccipital muscles release. It's immediate. The third visualization addresses the biotensegrity we discussed earlier. It is called light through the bones.
This is a powerful structural image. You imagine that all of your bones are no longer dense calcium, but are made of clear, hollow, spun glass.
Glass bones.
And the fascial web around them is a glowing, fluid web of golden light fibers. You visualize a laser-straight, pure beam of light coming up from the center of the earth, passing effortlessly up through your hollow leg bones, up the center of your glass vertebrae, and beaming out the top of your head.
You are visualizing the pure, absolute force line of gravity. You're mentally dumping all of your physical weight down the hollow center of those glass bones.
Exactly.
And in this visualization, any muscle that is still stubbornly clutching feels like a dark, opaque shadow blocking the pure light. So you just let the light burn the shadow away.
And the final, and perhaps most physiologically powerful metaphor, is the water float, or warm honey visualization.
Oh, I like this one.
You imagine yourself submerged in a pool of perfectly body temperature water up to your chin. Water exerts hydrostatic pressure equally on all surfaces of an object. This gives the nervous system a vivid mathematical metaphor for equalizing the tension across the entire fascial web.
The water just holds you everywhere.
The natural buoyancy of the water lifts you from the armpits and the ribs, providing a top-down release of the spine without requiring an ounce of muscular effort.
And what about the warm honey?
Alternatively, you imagine your dense tissues are made of warm honey. As the temperature rises, the viscosity lowers, and you actively visualize the fascia melting from that rigid, thixotropic gel state back into a flowing, liquid soul state.
And we absolutely have to pause and reiterate the biological mechanism here, because a skeptical listener might think, okay, picturing warm honey is a nice poetry exercise, but it doesn't actually change my anatomy.
But it does.
It does. Because this isn't just a mental trick. This triggers a proven biological phenomenon. Fascia is piezoelectric.
The piezoelectric effect is the defining mechanism of structural remodeling. Piezoelectricity is a physical property where certain materials generate a measurable physical electrical charge in response to applied mechanical stress.
I wanted to break this down clearly for the listener. It is the exact same technology used in a quartz watch.
Right.
Inside a quartz watch, there's a tiny crystal of quartz. When the battery applies electricity to it, the crystal mechanically bends and vibrates at a precise frequency to keep time. But it works in reverse, too.
It's bidirectional.
If you take a quartz crystal and mechanically squeeze it with pliers, it will generate a spark of electricity. The physical pressure creates an electrical current.
That is the perfect explanation. And the collagen triple helices that make up your fascial web are semiconductors. They are highly piezoelectric.
So when you visualize...
When you use these vivid visualizations to make conscious, incredibly subtle micro-adjustments in your skeletal alignment, when you float the cork or balance the glass bones, you alter the distribution of mechanical stress and shear force across the collagen fibers.
And as those fibers stretch and compress in new, healthier ways, they generate a new, localized electrical charge.
Exactly. And the fibroblasts, builder cells we talked about earlier that live inside the web, are exquisitely sensitive to electrical fields.
They can read it?
They literally read the new electrical current. They sense the new mechanical environment, and they begin to dissolve the old, chaotic, dense armor. They then lay down brand new collagen molecules, but this time they align them in a fluid, resilient, organized pattern that matches your new visualization.
The mental imagery creates a physical adjustment, the physical adjustment creates an electrical charge, and the electrical charge literally permanently rewrites the structural integrity of the tissue.
It is utterly astounding. It closes the loop entirely between the mind and the cellular matrix.
The water visualizations are powerful, but the source material takes this concept one monumental step further.
Yes, into the physical realm.
How do we turn this imaginative metaphor of warm honey or water into an actual, measurable, physical biofeedback loop? Because sometimes, especially when we are highly stressed, poetic imagery isn't enough. We need a hard physical dial on the dashboard to tell us if we are succeeding.
We need data.
Right. And the answer, according to our second source document, lies in literal temperature.
This brings us to a synthesis of ancient wisdom and modern diagnostic technology. Thermal equilibrium and the Taoist concept of the water body.
The text introduces the ancient Taoist somatic philosophy first. It draws a stark binary distinction between what they call the freeze body and the water body.
It is perhaps the oldest recorded description of exactly the neurofascial dynamics we are discussing. The freeze body represents our unconscious tensions, our unhealthy, stagnant, terrified state.
It's the armor.
It is metabolic energy and physical tissue that has quite literally crystallized into a rigid defense mechanism. It is the ancient terminology for Reich's character armor.
And the water body is the goal.
The water body is the deeply fluid, healthy, adaptable state. It's crucial to understand it isn't mushy or collapsed.
Right. It still has structure.
It is a state of highly responsive, coherent fluid pressure. It is the tensegrity web operating perfectly. It is the thixotropic gel returning permanently to a flowing, liquid soul state.
And the brilliant empirical insight in the source material is that this poetic ancient metaphor has a direct, measurable physical correlate in modern medical thermography.
It's not just a metaphor.
Heat distribution in the human body is not arbitrary or random. It's a highly accurate, real-time map of metabolic activity, inflammation, and fluid flow.
Thermography cameras allow us to literally see the freeze body and the water body. Let's break down the three primary thermal states you see on a scan.
Let's do it.
First, you have ice, or localized hypothermia. This shows up as dark blue or black on the scan. This is the dense, armored tissue.
The frozen history.
Because the fascia is locked into a tight gel, the capillary beds are crushed. Blood flow and interstitial fluid are severely restricted. It is emotionally walled off, metabolically dead, and it literally feels colder to the touch. This is the ultimate expression of the freeze body.
Then, right next to the ice, you often find fire.
Fire is inflammation. It shows up as bright red or white on the scan. This is the localized pain we talked about. It is the squeaky wheel losing the tug of war.
It's burning up.
It is hyperactive. The physical friction of the misaligned fascial fibers constantly pulling against the dense armor creates excess metabolic heat. It is the absolute over-effort of those fast-twitch phasic muscles screaming as they try to hold up the misaligned skeleton.
And finally, you have equilibrium, or homeostasis.
Equilibrium shows up as a smooth, even, warm green or yellow wash across the entire body. It indicates healthy, resilient, highly hydrated fascia.
Everything is flowing.
The capillary beds are open. It creates a thermal bridge where metabolic heat is distributed evenly and efficiently across the whole tensegrity system, rather than pooling in hot spots or being blocked by cold spots.
So how does a listener actually use this information? We don't have thermal cameras in our living rooms.
Not yet, anyway.
The expert clinical insight here is using your subjective sense of temperature as an internal biofeedback dashboard.
Remember that excessive muscular effort, the armoring, the parasitic tension, always burns fuel. And burning fuel creates thermal noise.
Right.
It creates noticeable hot spots of friction and noticeable cold spots of numb ischemia. By using your mindfulness to internally scan for these temperature gradients, you entirely bypass the analytical, frustrating part of the brain.
You stop asking the analytical question, which specific muscle is tight right now? Is it my rhomboid? Is it my levator scapulae?
Exactly. The brain gets lost trying to answer that.
Instead, you just ask a primitive sensory question. Where do I feel hot and where do I feel cold?
Precisely. You find the localized heat, the burning in the neck, and using your focused attention, you mentally drain that heat, visualizing pouring it like warm liquid into the cold, numb spot in your lower back or chest.
Thermal leveling.
This practice is called thermal leveling. You are speaking the absolute subconscious, primitive language of homeostatic balance.
And again, just like the piezoelectric effect, this visualization creates an immediate, measurable biological change. It triggers vasodilation.
Yes, by vividly visualizing warmth moving into a cold, ischemic area. Your brain's autonomic nervous system responds by physically relaxing the smooth muscle tissue around the blood vessels in that area.
The pipes open up?
The vessels dilate. They open up. This rushes fresh, warm arterial blood directly into the cold zone. This physically warms the local tissue, which actively lowers the viscosity of the fascial gel. It triggers the literal physical thaw of the frozen history.
And as the dense gel thaws and softens, the millions of sensory nerves that were trapped and suffocating inside the ice suddenly get decompressed.
And that rapid nerve decompression is exactly what creates that profound subjective feeling of streaming, vibrating, or tingling aliveness that people experience during deep somatic releases.
The blinded tissue is rushing back onto the brain's sensory map. The lights are turning back on.
It's an incredible feeling.
There is a profound psychological component to this specific approach that I want to highlight from the text. The sources state that the traumatized brain will accept the idea of the water body, this concept of fluid strength, much more readily and safely than it will ever accept the concept of a relaxed body.
That is a crucial clinical distinction for anyone dealing with severe trauma or deep armoring. The word relax is deeply triggering.
Really?
If you tell a highly armored, anxious nervous system to just relax and let your muscles go soft, the brain immediately feels terrifyingly vulnerable. To the nervous system, relaxation feels like dropping your shield in the middle of a battlefield.
It feels like a collapse.
It feels like collapse. It will trigger an immediate panic response, and the person will rearmor even harder to protect themselves from the vulnerability of relaxation.
But fluidity is a completely different paradigm.
Fluidity is inherently strong. Think of ocean waves crashing against a cliff. Water is impossible to break because it possesses infinite adaptability. It just effortlessly flows around the impact and reforms.
So when you visualize water,
When the traumatized brain visualizes becoming fluid, it doesn't feel like it is dropping its shield. It feels a different, much more resilient kind of strength. It accepts the physical integration without triggering the deep survival threat response.
I love the analogy the text uses to translate this concept for the listener. It says, you aren't trying to fix a broken machine. You are simply thawing a frozen garden.
Beautiful phrasing.
You aren't actively trying to forcefully relax, which ironically requires a tremendous amount of mental effort. You are just stepping back and becoming a passive internal thermostat, observing the hot and cold spots and gently redistributing the energetic water.
It's like finding a kinked garden hose in the sun.
Exactly. You don't scream at the hose to relax. You just gently unkink it, and the fluid pressure naturally restores the shape. It is a brilliant operating system.
It is incredibly elegant, and it perfectly aligns with the body's innate desire to heal itself.
But here is the ultimate real-world test. All of this theory is deeply profound if you are lying on a yoga mat in a quiet, dimly lit room for a 45-minute dedicated meditation session.
Which most of us don't have time for.
Exactly. How does the listener actually apply this biology when they're gripped with anxiety, stressed out in gridlock traffic, or sitting at their desk running 10 minutes late for a high-stakes meeting? How do we use this in the chaos of real life?
We have to adapt it.
That brings us to our final, highly practical synthesis: micro-interventions in daily life, putting the software into practice.
The source material is adamant that we have to outline a practical transition. We have to move away from the idea of dedicated meditation time and move toward the concept of micro-interventions.
Catching it in the act.
The overarching goal is to catch the autonomic nervous system in the absolute act of armoring before the fascia has a chance to physically set and thicken into that dense gel.
The mantra here is frequency over intensity. Doing a biological check-in 10 times a day for just 10 seconds is vastly more effective at rewiring neuroplasticity than suffering through a 1-hour yoga class once a week and ignoring your body the rest of the time.
Repetition is how the brain learns.
The text details a highly specific 30-second method called the SSB method: scan, sync, breathe. Let's walk the listener through exactly how to do this today.
Step 1 is the scan. It is a rapid 5-second tension spot check. You attach this habit to daily transitions. The moment you hang up a stressful phone call, the moment you put your car in park, the moment you open your laptop.
What are we scanning for?
You rapidly check the 4 primary somatic clutch points. These are the jaw, the space right between your eyebrows, the tops of your shoulders, and the pelvic floor. You're simply scanning to see if you are unconsciously clutching the air.
And the key here is you aren't looking for pain. You are looking for effort. Unnecessary parasitic effort.
Right. Step 2 is sync. This is the skeletal handoff we discussed with Feldenkrais.
How do you do that?
Once you locate the tension, Let's say your shoulders are up by your ears. Do not try to forcibly push them down or relax them. Sinking is entirely different. You consciously drop the mass of that body part into your underlying skeleton.
So if I'm sitting,
If you are sitting down, shift your awareness away from your shoulders and feel your sit bones against the chair. Realize that the chair and the floor are holding your weight. You consciously drop the effort of sitting into the bones, letting gravity take over.
and step 3 is breathe.
The volumetric pulse. You do not take a series of deep, hyperventilating breaths. You take one single, gentle 3D breath.
Like the balloon again.
You imagine your torso as a volumetric container of water, and the water level rises softly and equally in all directions, front, back, sides. This tiny internal hydrostatic pulse acts as a mechanical reset for the fibroblasts.
It keeps the tissue fluid.
It hydrates the fascia and prevents the ground substance from turning into a stiff gel during the stress of the workday.
Scan, sync, breathe. It takes 30 seconds. The text also provides a slightly longer 3-minute thermal leveling practice. This is for when you have just a little more time, maybe sitting in your car before walking into the house.
In those 3 minutes, you map the thermal gradients. Where are you hot with friction? Where are you cold and numb? You visualize a deep reservoir of warm, glowing liquid gold resting just behind your navel, your center of gravity.
And then you move it.
You mentally direct that warm liquid to flow out into the cold, numb spots. And as the temperature across your body equalizes in your mind's eye, you execute that skeletal handoff, letting the bones float in the newly warmed fluid.
And there is one final micro-intervention, which beautifully combines every single scientific concept we have talked about today. The text calls it the fluid walk.
This one is my favorite.
It is a dynamic combination of traditional Buddhist kinhin, which is a slow walking meditation integrated with modern thermal tensegrity.
Walking is the fundamental human default movement. If you can manage to realign your fascial tensegrity while you are actively walking, you change the entire foundation of your physical existence.
So how do you do the fluid walk?
In the fluid walk, you don't focus on your posture. You use the physical contact of your foot hitting the ground as a mechanical pump. With every step, you visualize pumping that warm honey up through the fascial web, lowering the viscosity of your entire body.
And the skeleton.
Crucially, you visualize your skeleton as a suspended pendulum.
The leg bones are just freely swinging under the floating pelvis with absolutely zero internal resistance or muscular friction.
If we connect this specific practice to the bigger picture, doing these micro-interventions, especially while in motion, fundamentally rewrites what neuroscientists call the subconscious kinetic map.
The actual blueprint.
When an area of character armor finally melts and yields, it is a highly vulnerable moment. You must immediately give the brain a new, highly efficient structural anchor like the feeling of the bone transferring weight to the ground. Or the nervous system will panic at the loss of the armor and immediately reclench.
So the walk teaches it a new normal.
The fluid walk teaches the nervous system in real time that it can safely move through the world without violently bracing against it.
There's also a phenomenal, simple cognitive trick mentioned here for daily life, the opposite awareness trick. If your shoulders are screaming tight, do not focus your attention on your shoulders.
Shift all of your focus to the exact opposite end of the web.
Focus intensely on the soles of your feet touching your shoes. Globalizing your attention naturally melts the local armor because it forces the somatosensory cortex to instantly remap and see the entire tensegrity web rather than obsessing over the squeaky wheel.
It all circles back, reiterating Feldenkrais one last time. Any extra muscular effort inherently equals extra metabolic heat and pain. Thermal equilibrium prevents chronic tiredness because no single part of your system is being forced to overheat or overwork to compensate for a blind spot.
I want to speak directly to you, the listener, right now. Taking these concepts out of the theoretical realm and applying them is the key. Doing that 30-second SSB scan, sync, breathe just 10 times throughout your day will absolutely update your body's neurological default setting.
It's totally doable, too.
It is, without a doubt, the most practical, life-altering takeaway from all of this incredibly deep science.
It is the ultimate bridge. It is how you finally update the software to permanently heal the hardware.
So to wrap up this incredibly dense deep dive, we have covered a monumental paradigm shift today. The biomedical model of the body as a solid machine made of separate, isolated pulleys and levers is completely obsolete.
The relic.
We are continuous, highly intelligent, fluid-based tensegrity networks where our deepest emotional history literally, structurally becomes our physical geometry. But we are not trapped by that history.
Now we have the tools now.
By utilizing interoception, volumetric breathing, and the biofeedback of thermal equilibrium, we have the biological tools to override the freeze body from the top down.
We can return to the natural state of the water body. We have the exact biological mechanisms to literally thaw our frozen history.
I want you to take a moment and think about exactly where your bones are resting right now as you listen to my voice. Check in with your body. Are you holding yourself up with an invisible layer of effort?
It's so easy to do without realizing.
Are the muscles in your neck acting like exhausted sprint runners trying to hold a heavy door open against gravity? Or are you letting gravity do the work? Are you letting your skeleton float?
It is a question worth asking yourself a dozen times a day in every scenario you find yourself in.
It absolutely is the question that changes everything. And I want to leave you with one final, deeply provocative thought to mull over today as you go about your week. Throughout this deep dive, we've talked almost entirely about how neurofascial integration affects physical pain, structural posture, and exhaustion.
The physical symptoms.
But if our subconscious nervous system is powerful enough to literally freeze our traumatic emotional history into the structural connective tissue of our physical bodies, what profound mental, psychological, or creative barriers might suddenly dissolve if we simply learned how to physically thaw our fascia?
That is the big question.
If the anxious mind literally shapes the rigid body, how much could physically freeing the body unlock the true potential of the mind?
That is a profound, lifelong question to explore on your own.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Take that 3D breath, stay curious, stay fluid, and we will catch you next time.